Welcome to Shadow Frames, where forgotten images reveal their darkest secrets. The photograph before us appears deceptively mundane at first glance, a dormitory room at the Greystone Orphanage, captured in early autumn of 1897. The black and white image shows two neat rows of 6 small beds, each with identical wool blankets folded with military precision. Tall windows with heavy curtains line one wall, while a single door, visibly sturdy and reinforced, stands closed at the far end. What makes this image chilling is not what it shows, but what we know is missing. These 12 beds once belonged to 12 children, all between the ages of 7 and 10, who vanished without explanation on September 28, 1897. The door remained locked from the outside. The windows were still latched from within. The only item out of place was a single porcelain doll, placed precisely in the center of the floor, where no doll had been when the matron had locked the children in for the night. Records from the orphanage indicate nothing unusual about that evening. The children, 6 boys and 6 girls who shared this dormitory due to overcrowding in the main building, had their supper at 6, evening prayers at 7, and were locked in for the night at 8 o'clock, as was the institution's strict policy. The night watchman reported no disturbances during his rounds, passing the dormitory door 3 times during the night. It wasn't until morning, when the matron came to wake the children, that she discovered every bed empty, the room undisturbed, and only that solitary doll remaining. The photograph was taken by police investigators later that same day. Look closely at the doll in the image. Its porcelain face bears a strange expression, neither smile nor frown, but something unsettlingly in between. Its glass eyes reflect the camera flash in a way that seems to capture a knowing gleam. According to statements from the orphanage staff, this doll belonged to none of the children. No one had ever seen it before. The investigation that followed produced no bodies, no witnesses, and no explanation. The children were never found. The case files note that the doll was taken as evidence, but mysteriously disappeared from the police station 3 days later. What makes this case particularly disturbing are the journal entries of the orphanage director, found years later in the institution's archives. In the weeks before the disappearance, he had documented strange behavior among the 12 children, whispering to themselves when alone, drawing identical spiral patterns in their lesson books, and speaking of the lady who visits at night, despite the dormitory being locked from the outside. The orphanage closed the following year. The building stood abandoned until 1922, when it burned to the ground. But this photograph remains. The empty beds, the locked room, and that enigmatic doll at the center of it all, the only witness to whatever transpired on that autumn night in 1897. Few know it, but a second photograph exists from that investigation. One never officially entered into evidence. I discovered it lodged between the pages of a county clerk's personal journal, donated to our archives last winter. This image shows the interior of the orphanage director's private office, taken the same day as the dormitory photograph. The office presents a stark contrast to the dormitory's orderly appearance. Papers lie scattered across the floor, desk drawers hang open, and a heavy ledger lies splayed on the carpet. But most disturbing are the walls, every inch covered with the same spiral pattern mentioned in the children's lesson books, drawn in what appears to be charcoal. The investigating officer who took this photograph, Detective Thomas Merrick, never filed it with his official report. His personal notes, which I've spent months tracking down, suggest why. The director claims no knowledge of the markings, Merrick wrote, yet his fingers were black with the same charcoal. When questioned, he became agitated, insisting repeatedly that she made me do it while I slept. Medical examination shows the man to be in sound mind, but deeply terrified. I've chosen to withhold certain photographs to prevent public hysteria. The spiral pattern itself deserves closer scrutiny. Experts in folklore I've consulted believe it resembles ancient symbols associated with passageways between worlds. In Celtic traditions particularly, similar spirals were carved at tomb entrances, boundaries between the living and dead. Local newspaper archives reveal another dimension to this mystery. In the months before the disappearances, 3 separate articles mention unusual atmospheric phenomena around Greystone Orphanage. Strange lights were reported hovering near the building's north wing, where the dormitory was located, and several townspeople described hearing children's songs at impossible hours emanating from the grounds, even when all orphans were accounted for indoors. Most revealing is what became of the orphanage staff. Of the 7 adults employed there, 5 died within 18 months of the incident. The night watchman was found hanging from an oak tree on the property, an apparent suicide, though his wife insisted he had been in good spirits. 2 matrons succumbed to unexplained illnesses characterized by rapid deterioration and hallucinations. The cook and groundskeeper both disappeared while traveling to neighboring towns. Only the director and his assistant survived beyond 2 years. The assistant, Mabel Whitaker, eventually relocated to Phoenix, Arizona, where she lived until 1943. Among her possessions after death was a sealed envelope containing a small porcelain finger, broken from a doll, and a note reading only, "They follow me still." The director himself, Edward Carmichael, was committed to Holloway Sanitarium in 1901 after attempting to burn down his own home. Asylum records indicate he remained largely uncommunicative except during nights of the full moon, when staff would find him huddled in corners, whispering to what he called the children who never left. His final recorded words before his death in 1911 were, "The spiral opens only one way." The spiral pattern holds the key to understanding this case, though I hesitated to include this information until now. After locating Mabel Whitaker's personal effects in an Arizona Historical Society archive, I discovered a leather journal wedged into the false bottom of her traveling trunk. The journal contains observations about the 12 children in the months preceding their disappearance. The Fenwick twins began it. She wrote in an entry dated July 12, 1897, "Always the quiet ones, now whispering to the walls at night." Henry followed next, then little Catherine with her endless drawings. They speak of someone called the Hollow Lady. Director Carmichael dismisses it as childish fancy, but I've seen how he watches them when he thinks no one is looking, with envy, not concern. Subsequent entries document escalating peculiarities. The children reportedly sleepwalked in perfect synchronization. They hummed melodies that Mabel described as mathematics turned to music, formulae that opened something in the mind. Most tellingly, they collected small objects, buttons, coins, smooth stones, arranging them in spiral patterns beneath their beds. The final entry, dated September 27th, contains a hasty sketch of the porcelain doll alongside this cryptic observation. It appeared on the windowsill tonight. The children greeted it like an old friend. "God help me," I heard it whispering back. Parish records reveal another overlooked connection. All 12 children, despite arriving at Greystone from different circumstances, shared an unusual birth date, all born during the same lunar eclipse on December 19, 1887. This astronomical rarity, known locally as the Midnight Crown, had been commemorated in regional folklore as a time when the veil grows thin enough for ancient things to reach through. Dr. Eleanor Harmon, who examined the doll before its disappearance from police evidence, left detailed notes about its construction. "The porcelain contains unusual mineral compounds," she wrote. "The clay appears to incorporate ash of unknown origin. Most puzzling are the microscopic inscriptions inside the hollow head, spiraling text in no language I recognize, though Professor Whitcomb suggests similarities to pre-Etruscan ritual markings." The building that replaced Greystone after the fire was Rose Hill Academy, a prestigious boarding school that operated until 1971. Interviews with former students reveal an unwritten rule about the North Garden, where the children's dormitory once stood. No one ventured there after dark. Those who did reported vivid nightmares of children playing impossible games and a tall woman with hollow eyes who asks you to follow. Perhaps most disturbing is what happened in 1937, exactly 40 years after the disappearance. 12 children from scattered locations across the state, all born during another rare celestial alignment, vanished from their beds on the night of September 28th. In each empty bed, a single porcelain finger, identical to the one Mabel Whitaker kept sealed away. The spiral doesn't just represent a passageway. According to marginalia in Carmichael's personal copy of Thresholds Unseen, a compendium of folkloric transitions, such symbols can become the passage itself when activated properly. The pattern is both map and key. One annotation reads in Carmichael's increasingly erratic handwriting, "They weren't taken, they were shown how to leave. Since uncovering these connections, I've become convinced the 40-year cycle is significant." My research led me to Professor Amelia Thornton, a cultural anthropologist specializing in folkloric patterns across civilizations. Though initially skeptical, she agreed to examine my evidence after seeing the spiral drawings. "This pattern appears in isolated cultures that never had contact," she explained, spreading comparative photographs across her desk. ancient Mesopotamia, pre-Columbian South America, Neolithic Scotland, all with nearly identical spiral motifs associated with cyclical disappearances. What's most intriguing is the timing. 40 years represents what many ancient cultures considered a complete generation cycle. The professor's archives contained a monograph from 1874 documenting another incident, 13 children vanishing from a mission school in the same county. Though details were sparse, the account mentioned a peculiar toy left behind and circular markings upon the floor. I've traced the land records backward and discovered something remarkable. Before Greystone Orphanage, before the mission school, the land belonged to a settlement that colonial documents call peculiar in their beliefs and practices. This community vanished in 1797, with authorities finding only empty dwellings and, according to one account, foreign dolls placed as if in vigil. The 40-year cycle places the next potential incident in 1977, but my research shows no similar disappearances that year. Instead, I found something perhaps more disturbing. Birth records indicating 12 children born during a rare celestial conjunction that November, all within 50 miles of the former orphanage site. Those children would now be in their 40s. I've located 9 of them through public records. Each leads an unremarkable life with one shared anomaly. None have children of their own. The 3 I've managed to interview all report lifelong sleep disturbances and recurring dreams of a game played with spiral rules and a woman who waits at the edge of sleep. One showed me a childhood drawing she's kept for over 30 years, a crude but unmistakable rendering of the same porcelain doll. Most alarming is what I discovered yesterday. Astronomical projections confirm a celestial alignment this coming December, nearly identical to the one preceding each previous incident. And birth records from 17 counties show an unusual cluster, 11 children born during a partial eclipse last year. The 12th space in the pattern remains empty. I've begun hearing humming at night, mathematical melodies that seem familiar though I've never learned them. My sleep is troubled by visions of spiral staircases descending into darkness. Twice now I've awakened to find my fingers black with charcoal, though I own none. Most disturbing. This morning I discovered a small porcelain finger on my windowsill. Under magnification, it bears microscopic spiral patterns identical to those described in Dr. Harmon's notes from 1897. The 40-year cycle wasn't broken in 1977. It was merely recalibrating. I fear I've drawn attention by uncovering this pattern. The spiral isn't just a symbol or pathway. I believe it's watching back. The voice messages on my answering machine have become increasingly concerning. 3 different archivists who assisted my research have called with similar accounts, finding spiral patterns drawn on their office walls, experiencing lost time, and most disturbingly, glimpsing what they describe as a tall woman with hollow eyes, standing at the foot of their beds. I've begun compiling a timeline of strange occurrences throughout the region's history. The pattern extends beyond the 40-year cycle I initially identified. Historical newspaper archives reveal smaller incidents occurring at precise 10-year intervals between the major disappearances, lone children vanishing, mysterious fires, unexplained animal deaths near the old orphanage grounds, all centered around dates when celestial bodies align in specific configurations. Yesterday, I visited the county records office to examine property deeds predating the colonial settlement. The clerk brought out a weathered leather portfolio that hadn't been requested in decades. Inside was a surveyor's map from 1657 showing the original landscape before development. What caught my attention wasn't the crude rendering of forests and streams, but rather the surveyor's notation marked across the future orphanage site: land unsuitable for habitation. Natives refuse approach. Spiral stones stand in clearing. The clerk mentioned something else. The current owner of the property has submitted plans to develop it into a children's retreat center, with groundbreaking scheduled for next month. I managed to obtain photographs of these spiral stones from an archaeological assessment conducted in 1962. The images show 7 monoliths arranged in a pattern identical to the stellar configuration that precedes each disappearance cycle. More disturbing is the archaeologist's note that the stones contain unusual mineral deposits matching those found in the porcelain doll fragments. Professor Thornton has stopped responding to my messages. Her university department claims she's taken sudden sabbatical leave, though her research assistant confided she hasn't been seen since examining the journal I provided. Her office has been sealed by campus security after maintenance staff reported extensive markings covering the walls. The 11 children I identified, all born during last year's eclipse, share another connection I initially missed. Each birth certificate lists complications requiring emergency intervention, all occurring precisely as the eclipse reached maximum coverage. Medical notes describe identical anomalies, unusual cranial development, and abnormal response to stimuli. Hospital records show all 11 children have been scheduled for developmental assessment next week at the same pediatric specialty clinic. The appointment calendar lists a 12th slot marked only with an asterisk. This morning, I woke to find my research materials rearranged. The photographs, documents, and notes had been organized in a perfect spiral on my study floor. At the center lay a small porcelain hand, not just a finger now, but an entire miniature palm, with fingers curved in a beckoning gesture. When I tried to photograph it, my camera failed. When I attempted to collect it as evidence, my hand passed through it as if through smoke. Yet it remains visible, seemingly solid to my eyes alone. The humming has grown louder. The charcoal markings now appear not just on my fingers, but spiral up my arms while I sleep. Something is completing a pattern, and I fear I've become part of its design. The surveillance footage from the pediatric clinic arrived today, delivered by a clerk who knocked on my door at 3 in the morning, eyes vacant, movements mechanical. I didn't ask how she found my home address. The VHS tape contains 83 minutes of security camera footage showing the waiting room where those 11 children were scheduled to meet. They arrived with their parents at precise 5-minute intervals, each family unaware of the pattern they were fulfilling. The children, despite never having met, immediately formed a circle in the play area, ignoring toys and books to sit in perfect stillness. Their parents' concerned glances went unnoticed as the children stared at an empty spot in their center. At exactly 11 minutes past noon, the footage distorts with static interference. When it clears 17 seconds later, a 12th child has joined their circle. The tape shows no entrance, no door opening. The child simply appears, as if stepping through an invisible threshold. This 12th child wears antiquated clothing, a pinafore dress and polished boots reminiscent of late 19th century fashion. Though the footage is grainy, her face reveals an unsettling symmetry, her movements fluid yet somehow wrong, as if performing humanity from written instructions. What happens next has forced me to question my own sanity. The 12 children rise in unison and begin tracing patterns in the air, identical flowing movements creating invisible geometries. The adults in the room appear frozen, unresponsive to this bizarre choreography. At 37 minutes into the recording, a tall figure enters the frame, standing in the doorway. The proportions are wrong, limbs too elongated, neck impossibly thin. The figure wears what appears to be a matron's uniform from the Victorian era, but the fabric shifts and ripples despite the absence of wind. Her face remains turned away from the camera, but the children all pivot toward her simultaneously, their expressions transforming from blank attentiveness to rapturous recognition. The static returns, more pronounced this time, and when the picture stabilizes, the waiting room is empty of all children. The adults remain motionless for precisely 40 seconds before suddenly resuming normal behavior, looking around in confusion, calling out names, panic gradually mounting as they realize their children are gone. I've analyzed the background audio from this footage and discovered something chilling. Beneath the static interference, processed through noise filtering software, a woman's voice can be heard reciting what sounds like a nursery rhyme. 12 little seekers, born of the dark, each one carrying my hidden mark. The spiral turns both ways, you see. One path for them, one path for me. In hollow spaces between the stars, I've waited long behind ancient bars. The pattern's price is paid in youth, for doors need keys to tell the truth. This morning I discovered a small wooden box on my kitchen table, a music box I neither purchased nor recognize. When wound, it plays the exact melody I've been hearing in my dreams. Inside the lid, a newspaper clipping I initially mistook for aged yellowed paper. Upon closer inspection, it's tomorrow's date, with a headline yet to be printed. Local researcher missing, police baffled by spiral patterns. The final piece has fallen into place. The Hollow Lady doesn't just take children, she needs someone to remember, to document, to complete her pattern across time. The historian, the witness, the keeper of her story. I recognize my role now. I've become the 12th space. The porcelain hand has moved. I discovered this after returning from the basement where I'd gone searching for cassette tapes to preserve the clinic footage. The miniature palm now rests atop my research journal, fingers splayed across the page where I'd documented the celestial alignments. The impossible object has begun leaving marks, faint, dusty impressions that resemble partial fingerprints but form tiny spiral patterns when examined under magnification. I received a package yesterday from Mabel Whitaker's grandniece in Arizona. Inside was a music box identical to the one that appeared in my kitchen, along with a letter Mabel had left with instructions to forward it to whoever comes asking about the spiral children. The letter, dated 1942, contains a single paragraph. They don't disappear, they transform. The spiral isn't a path away, but a path through. The hollow lady doesn't take, she becomes. Count the dolls, count the children, count the years between. The numbers never align because she splits herself with each cycle. I've spent 18 hours cross-referencing museum collections across the country. 27 porcelain dolls matching our description have surfaced in private collections and historical societies since 1897, each discovered precisely 1 year after a child went missing in unexplained circumstances. The dolls' appearances coincide with reported sightings of a tall woman in outdated dress in each location. Professor Thornton's research assistant called from a payphone, her voice barely above a whisper. She claimed to have entered Thornton's office despite the security seals and discovered a hidden compartment beneath a floorboard. Inside was a journal documenting Thornton's investigation into similar disappearances across 5 continents. The final entry, dated 3 days before her disappearance, contained coordinates to a location 17 miles from the orphanage site, alongside the words, "The spiral stones aren't markers, they're anchors. She can't finish without them." I visited the development site today. Construction equipment sits abandoned, though work was scheduled to begin this week. The foreman's trailer stands empty, paperwork still spread across the desk, coffee cold in its mug. A perfect spiral of small handprints marks the dirt outside, leading toward the trees where the original stones once stood. Most disturbing are the photographs developing in my dark room, images I have no memory of taking. They show 12 children standing in a circle in that same clearing, their faces blurred except for their eyes, which reflect light like polished glass. Among them stands the 12th child from the clinic footage, now unmistakably doll-like, her skin taking on the sheen of porcelain. Behind them looms a figure growing increasingly substantial with each frame, her hollow eyes gaining depth, her outline solidifying as the children's forms grow more translucent. The humming has resolved into words now. Not a nursery rhyme, but an incantation. Not a summoning, but a transformation. The charcoal marks on my arms have reached my shoulders. When I close my eyes, I see through different ones, 12 pairs simultaneously, viewing a world where the spiral isn't a symbol, but the true shape of time itself. I understand now. She doesn't take the children. She becomes them, and they become her, over and over. And now she needs someone to record it all. The porcelain hand has vanished from my journal, but its dusty imprints remain. More troubling is what I discovered this morning. My own handwriting filling 10 pages I have no memory of writing. The text details an elaborate ritual involving the spiral stones, celestial alignments, and the exchange of vessels. All written in technical terminology that seems beyond my knowledge. I've noticed something else. Reflective surfaces no longer show my face accurately. Mirrors, windows, even the polished metal of my toaster reveal subtle alterations with each passing day. My eyes appear increasingly hollow, cheekbones more pronounced, skin taking on an unnatural smoothness. When I touch my face, it feels normal, yet the reflection tells a different story. Yesterday I located the spiral stones, not the archaeological site, but where they've been relocated. The museum curator who assisted me has since been hospitalized with unexplained neurological symptoms, her brain scans showing spiral patterns of unusual activity across both hemispheres. The stones now reside in the private collection of industrialist Gerald Wentworth, displayed in the garden of his estate. Historical records reveal Wentworth's great-grandfather purchased the land adjacent to Greystone Orphanage in 1898, immediately after the disappearances. His family has since acquired properties connected to each subsequent incident. Police reports from 1937 show Wentworth's father was briefly questioned regarding the second wave of disappearances, but released without charge. The detective who conducted that interview died 3 days later. Official cause listed as suicide, despite evidence suggesting otherwise. I've obtained Wentworth family photographs spanning 5 generations. Each shows a tall, austere figure standing slightly apart from other family members, features remarkably consistent across decades. Most telling is a portrait from 1917 showing Gerald's grandmother with 12 children, none her own biological offspring, all adopted through irregular channels following disappearances from various institutions. The astronomical event approaches. 8 days remain until the alignment precisely mirrors that of 1897. Weather forecasts predict unusual atmospheric conditions, identical to those documented before previous incidents. I've received calls from parents of all 11 children from the clinic. Each reports the same phenomena, their child speaking in antiquated language, drawing spiral patterns, and referring to a grand exchange coming soon. One mother whispered that she found her daughter's skin cool and smooth like porcelain when kissing her goodnight. This morning, a package arrived containing a vintage camera, the exact model used to photograph the orphanage dormitory. No return address, no explanation. When I developed the test film, each frame showed the same image, a dormitory with 12 empty beds, though I had photographed only my living room. My phone rings at 3:33 each morning. When I answer, I hear children counting backward from 12 in perfect unison. I've discovered what completes the cycle. The Hollow Lady doesn't just need children and a witness. She requires a guardian, someone who maintains the boundary between worlds, who preserves the spiral stones, who prepares the next generation. The Wentworth family hasn't been tracking these events. They've been orchestrating them. I've located the Wentworth estate through property records, a sprawling Victorian mansion surrounded by manicured gardens that effectively conceal its true purpose. Before approaching, I compiled everything I've learned in waterproof documents, sealed copies, sent to 3 separate attorneys with instructions to open should I disappear. Surveillance of the estate revealed peculiar activities. Every evening at sunset, groundskeepers arranged 12 white chairs in a perfect circle within the stone arrangement. At midnight, Wentworth himself walks the perimeter, placing small objects at precise intervals, porcelain fragments that catch moonlight like tiny beacons. I gained access by posing as a journalist researching architectural preservation. The housekeeper who admitted me spoke with an accent I couldn't place, her movements fluid yet mechanical. As she led me through corridors lined with antiquated photographs, I noticed every frame contained children with the same vacant expressions, spanning decades yet somehow identical in their hollow-eyed stares. "Mr. Wentworth appreciates historical accuracy," she explained, catching me studying a particularly disturbing image of 12 children arranged around a seated figure whose face had been carefully excised from the photograph. Some stories must be preserved precisely as they occurred. The central hallway opened into a circular room I recognized immediately from Professor Thornton's diagrams, a perfect replica of the original orphanage dormitory, complete with 12 small beds arranged in 2 rows. The plaster ceiling featured an elaborate spiral pattern that seemed to shift subtly when viewed from different angles. "My family has always been interested in astronomical alignments," Wentworth announced, entering silently behind me. Tall and unnaturally thin, he moved with deliberate grace, as though performing ordinary human gestures from memory rather than instinct. The ancients understood what modern science has forgotten. Certain configurations opened doorways. He invited me to his study, where a single photograph hung above his desk, the original dormitory image I'd been researching. Beside it hung a modern photograph showing 11 children arranged in a semicircle, with a 12th space conspicuously empty. "You felt the changes already," he observed, studying my reflection in a silver tea service rather than looking directly at me. "The hollow sensation behind your eyes, the knowledge coming into your mind that isn't yours, the porcelain smoothness spreading beneath your skin." My dictaphone recorded nothing of our conversation when I checked it later. Instead, it captured children's voices counting rhythmically in a language I almost understood. As I left, Wentworth pressed a small box into my hand. "Your predecessor selected you carefully," he said. "The witness becomes the recorder becomes the guardian becomes the doorway. The cycle continues." Inside the box was a dormitory master key, its metal worn smooth by countless hands before mine, and a handwritten invitation to return tomorrow, exactly 40 hours before the alignment. The spiral doesn't just connect worlds. It connects generations of participants, each playing their ordained role. I began this investigation seeking answers about missing children, but I now understand with horrifying clarity. I'm not documenting this story. I'm completing it. The key in my palm feels impossibly heavy as I drive toward the Wentworth estate. The radio sputters between stations, occasionally catching fragments of children's choirs singing what sound like Victorian hymns, though no such broadcasts are scheduled. I've spent the night researching Gerald Wentworth's family line beyond what public records show. University archives yielded a dissertation from 1964 examining the Wentworth family's connection to a European occultist society called the Hollow Circle. The academic who wrote it disappeared before defending his work. Margin notes reference a family crest predating their American arrival, a spiral surrounding 12 stars with a 13th, larger star at center. The Wentworths weren't merely wealthy industrialists, they were caretakers, facilitators of a cycle far older than the orphanage incidents. Their earliest American ancestor, Thaddeus Wentworth, arrived in 1745 with a mysterious cargo that required special accommodation beneath the earth. County records show he purchased the exact land where the spiral stones would later be documented. I've discovered something else. The astronomical alignment occurring tomorrow isn't just rare, it's mathematically impossible according to 3 astrophysicists I consulted. These stellar positions cannot occur naturally, one wrote in a hasty email. Something must be influencing local gravitational fields to create this configuration. His subsequent messages grew increasingly disjointed before ceasing altogether. The vacant academic position Professor Thornton held, previously occupied by 12 different researchers over the past century, each disappearing or dying under mysterious circumstances after studying celestial anomalies above the Wentworth property. Most disturbing was what I found in medical literature, case studies of a rare condition called porcelain transmutation syndrome, documented just 6 times since medical records began. Victims experience progressive transformation of soft tissue into ceramic-like material, beginning at extremities and advancing inward. All cases occurred within 50 miles of spiral stone formations. All patients reported dreams of becoming vessels for something waiting to wear them. The road to Wentworth's estate seems longer than yesterday, the landscape increasingly unfamiliar. Trees along the roadside appear to bend inward, forming tunnel-like archways that weren't present before. My GPS shows me traveling a straight line, yet the sun has risen and set twice during what should be a 40-minute drive. I've noticed something else. My reflection in the rearview mirror remains motionless when I speak, yet its lips move when I'm silent, mouthing words I cannot hear. The invitation Wentworth gave me isn't just for my attendance. The elegant script, when examined under ultraviolet light, reveals a second message beneath. The witness becomes the vessel becomes the door becomes the lady becomes the children become the witnesses. This isn't the 12th cycle, it's the 13th. The car radio suddenly clarifies, a single child's voice cutting through static. We've been waiting for you to understand. It isn't about what happened to us. It's about what we're becoming, what you're becoming, what she's finally becoming. Wentworth Mansion appears on the horizon, though I've taken no turns. 12 white chairs visible in the garden. The 13th, larger than the others, stands empty at the circle's center, waiting for me. The estate grounds are silent as I approach. No birds singing, no insects humming. A vacuum of natural sound replaced by that faint mathematical melody I've come to recognize. The 13 chairs await in their perfect formation, the center one now draped with fabric that seems to absorb rather than reflect the fading daylight. When I try photographing the arrangement, my camera produces only images of an empty field. Yet beside each chair stands a small porcelain figure, child-sized dolls with faces that appear to be forming, features still indistinct but gradually resolving with each passing moment. Wentworth meets me at the garden threshold. You've noticed your perception shifting, he observes. Not a question, but a confirmation. The space between what is and what appears grows thinner for you. This is necessary preparation. He leads me not to the chairs but to a greenhouse structure behind them. Inside, spiraling shelves hold hundreds of identical porcelain dolls, each tagged with a date. The earliest bears a yellowed label marked 1718. The most recent, its porcelain still gleaming wetly as though newly fired, displays tomorrow's date. My ancestors weren't the architects of this cycle, Wentworth explains, removing gloves to reveal hands that appear too smooth, too uniform in texture. They were its first witnesses, chosen by her to observe and record. The responsibility transfers through recognition. The witness who truly comprehends becomes part of the pattern. He directs my attention to a glass cabinet containing weathered journals, hundreds of them, each bearing the same spiral insignia. I recognize the handwriting in the open volume as Professor Thornton's, though the text describes events that haven't yet occurred. She doesn't take the children, I begin, understanding dawning with terrible clarity. She becomes them, yes. Wentworth nods, but incompletely. Each cycle allows her to manifest more fully. The porcelain is merely the transitional medium, the bridge between her realm and ours. A photograph album lies open on a marble table, showing 13 previous figures like Wentworth, all with the same hollow-eyed stare, the same unnatural posture, spanning centuries yet somehow identical. The guardians, he explains, once witnesses who understood too much, transformed to maintain the threshold between cycles. What chills me most is the architectural drawing pinned beside it, plans for a children's retreat center, identical to the one proposed for the orphanage site. The document bears tomorrow's date and my signature, though I have no memory of producing it. The first 12 cycles prepared the vessels, Wentworth says, his voice taking on the harmonic quality I've heard in the children's counting. This 13th completes the sequence. She will wear the children who wear the porcelain, who wear her essence. The spiral closes tomorrow night. In the greenhouse corner stands a photographer's setup, camera, backdrop, lighting, identical to what would have been used to document the orphanage dormitory in 1897. Every witness must record what they observe, Wentworth explains, gesturing toward the equipment. It's how the memory transfers, how the pattern preserves itself across time. The camera's flash triggers without anyone touching it, momentarily blinding me. In that flash, I see 13 chairs, all occupied, 12 by children with porcelain-smooth skin, and the 13th by a figure with my face, hollow-eyed and waiting. As I return to my home from the Wentworth estate, the key burns cold against my palm, not metaphorically. Actual frost forms around the metal, crystallizing into miniature spiral patterns that vanish when I try to photograph them. My reflection has abandoned any pretense of mimicking my movements. It stands motionless in mirrors when I move, then performs actions I haven't taken when I remain still. This morning I watched my reflection methodically arrange objects on a shelf that doesn't exist in my world, placing 12 tiny porcelain figures in a perfect circle. I've made a breakthrough in understanding the astronomical impossibility occurring tomorrow. After comparing star charts from each previous cycle, I discovered the alignment isn't merely rare, it's artificial. The stars aren't actually moving into these positions. Rather, our perception of them is being altered within a specific geographic radius. The phenomenon creates a localized distortion that makes observers within the affected area perceive celestial bodies as forming the spiral pattern. The Astronomical Institute that helped me confirm this has gone silent. Their website now displays only a spiral insignia, and the words, "Observation continues uninterrupted." I've found financial records proving the Wentworth family has sponsored every major renovation of the orphanage land since 1756. Each construction project involved excavation to precisely the same depth, though official plans never indicated why. More telling is that each project employed exactly 12 orphan children as apprentices, all of whom vanished upon completion. The porcelain composition analysis I commissioned reveals something the previous researchers missed. The material contains human bone ash, microscopically integrated with the clay. Each doll isn't just a representation, it's partially constructed from its predecessors. Most disturbing was the package waiting on my doorstep, a small box containing a 19th century photographer's glass plates. When developed, they show what appears to be the original orphanage dormitory, but with a crucial difference. Taken moments before the children's disappearance, it shows them already beginning to transform. Their limbs elongated, faces smoothing into expressionless masks, fingers fusing into doll-like appendages. One final plate shows the empty room afterward, the single doll at center, but something moves at the frame's edge, captured mid-manifestation. A tall, impossibly thin figure emerging from what appears to be a tear in the visual field itself. The Historical Society curator who helped authenticate these plates called this morning. "There's a 13th plate," she whispered, her voice distorting rhythmically. "It shows what happens next. The plate appears blank until photographed, then it shows the viewer's own face. I understand now that the Hollow Lady isn't emerging into our world. She's been here all along, fragmented across time, using each cycle to reassemble herself through the children who serve as her components. The 13th chair isn't meant for me to simply witness. It's where the final transformation occurs, where the observer completes the circuit that will allow her full manifestation. The spiral isn't opening a door, it's becoming one. The dormitory key rests beside me on the kitchen table as I make my final recordings. The metal has changed overnight, no longer brass but something resembling porcelain with metallic inclusions that catch the light in impossible ways. When I hold it now, images flood my consciousness. Memories that aren't mine of children moving in synchronized patterns through the orphanage halls, of moonlight filtering through windows to illuminate spiral markings chalked on floorboards. I've cross-referenced asylum records from 5 different states and discovered something extraordinary. Edward Carmichael wasn't the only institutional director to suffer mental collapse following unexplained disappearances. 27 different facility administrators across 2 centuries exhibited identical symptoms, drawing compulsive spiral patterns, speaking of hollow voices, and describing children who wore her face beneath their own. Each breakdown occurred exactly 40 days after a disappearance under their watch. Most revealing was a journal I obtained from the granddaughter of the detective who investigated the 1937 incident. The investigator documented interviewing a night watchman who claimed to witness the actual moment of transformation. His statement, struck from official records, described 12 children melting like candles, their features running smooth while something else solidified within them. The watchman died 3 days after giving his testimony, his body found contorted into a spiral position. The physics professor I consulted about the spatial anomalies surrounding the Wentworth estate sent a final email before his disappearance. His calculations suggest the spiral formation doesn't merely symbolize a doorway, it actually warps local space-time, creating what he termed a recursive dimensional pocket. His closing words haunt me. The mathematics indicate this isn't the 13th iteration. It's the 13th attempt at the same iteration. Time itself is caught in the spiral. My phone rings constantly now with calls from the parents of those 11 children. Each reports the same progression. Their child's skin growing porcelain smooth, speech patterns becoming antiquated, body temperature dropping steadily. One father whispered that his daughter's arm made a hollow sound when accidentally struck against a door frame. The astronomical alignment occurs in 17 hours. Weather services report unprecedented aurora activity concentrated above the former orphanage site, though satellite imaging of the area shows only static interference. I've made my decision. I will attend Wentworth's gathering, but not as the witness he expects. The 13th chair awaits someone who will complete the circuit, but circuits can be broken. The dormitory key isn't just an invitation, it's a component in the mechanism. The porcelain hand has reappeared, now joined by a forearm that materializes and dematerializes at irregular intervals. It has begun arranging my research materials into precise patterns while I sleep. This morning I found it had assembled 12 paper dolls cut from my photographs, arranged in a circle around a 13th figure bearing my face. I understand my true purpose now. I wasn't drawn into this investigation by accident or curiosity. She has been calling me specifically, not to witness or record, but to interrupt. Every 13 cycles, someone recognizes the pattern for what it truly is. This time, that someone is me. The grounds of the Wentworth estate have transformed since yesterday, the landscaping subtly reconfigured into spiral patterns visible only from certain angles. As twilight approaches, the air feels dense with potential energy, compressing around the stone circle where 13 chairs now gleam with an opalescent sheen that defies their wooden construction. I arrive carrying a leather satchel containing everything I've brought as protection: salt harvested during a lunar eclipse, iron filings from a 19th century foundry, and most importantly, the original glass plate negatives I discovered hidden within a false wall in my basement last night. These plates, unlike the others, show something crucial: the exact moment when a previous witness disrupted the ritual in 1857. Gerald Wentworth greets me with transparent relief, his movements increasingly mechanical, joints bending at subtly wrong angles. "You understand your importance now," he says, voice resonating with multiple tonal layers. The 13th chair completes the circuit. The 11 children arrive in procession, led by adults whose faces appear blurred, features indistinct even at close range. Each child moves with identical rhythm, their skin luminous with an inner light that seems to pulse in synchronization. Their eyes reflect nothing, perfect dark pools that absorb rather than return light. "Where is the 12th? I ask, though I already suspect. Wentworth gestures toward the mansion. "Preparing. She's been with us longest, since 1897 in fact. The porcelain preservation requires periodic renewal. Inside the greenhouse, now transformed into a ceremonial space, hundreds of candles form concentric spiral patterns. At center stands an antique camera mounted on a tripod, its brass lens gleaming with unnatural light. Each witness must record the transition," Wentworth explains. "The image captures more than light. It harnesses the threshold moment when dimensions overlap. As astronomical twilight deepens, the sky above displays impossible configurations, stars visibly repositioning themselves into the spiral pattern documented in Carmichael's journals. The air vibrates with that mathematical melody I've come to recognize, now resolving into distinct words in a language that bypasses my ears to form directly in my consciousness. The 12th child emerges from the mansion, not a child at all, but a perfect porcelain doll at human scale, moving with fluid grace despite its seemingly solid construction. Its face bears features compiled from all my research photographs, a composite of every disappeared child across centuries. "She is almost complete," Wentworth whispers reverently. 13 cycles to gather enough fragments, 13 witnesses to remember her passage, 13 chairs to anchor her arrival. I take my position behind the camera as expected, adjusting settings with trembling hands while the children arrange themselves in their circle. The porcelain figure, both doll and child simultaneously, takes position opposite the vacant 13th chair. The dormitory key burns cold in my pocket as I prepare to make my move. The mechanism Wentworth believes I'll complete can indeed be disrupted, but only at tremendous cost. Previous witnesses tried and failed, becoming incorporated into the very pattern they sought to break. As I load the glass plate into the camera, I understand with perfect clarity, I'm not here to document her arrival. I'm here to ensure it never completes. The dormitory key ignites against my palm as I position the glass plate in the camera, my final act of apparent compliance. Wentworth nods approvingly, his hollow eyes reflecting the impossible constellations spiraling overhead. The ceremony has reached its apex. 11 children with porcelain-smooth skin seated in perfect formation, the 12th figure poised like a conductor before an orchestra, the 13th chair awaiting its occupant. The aperture must remain open for 13 seconds precisely, Wentworth instructs, his voice resonating at frequencies that make my teeth ache. The exposure captures the threshold moment when she fully manifests. What he doesn't know is that I've substituted one of the original plates, the one showing the interrupted ritual from 1857. Glass plates don't merely record images, they can project them as well. The camera becomes both receiver and transmitter when positioned at the spiral's center. As I prepare to trigger the mechanism, time fractures around us. The air shimmers with translucent impressions of previous ceremonies, ghostly children seated in identical formations across different eras, all occupying this same space simultaneously. I glimpse Professor Thornton standing exactly where I stand, then the detective from 1937, then others stretching backward through decades, all witnesses who recognize the pattern too late. "She comes," the children intone in perfect unison, their voices blending into harmonics that distort the very air. The 12th figure begins to transform, porcelain surface becoming permeable, revealing glimpses of something ancient moving beneath its surface, something composed of hollow spaces and hunger. I press the dormitory key against the camera's metal frame, completing a circuit never intended to exist. The brass tarnishes instantly where the key touches it, corrosion spreading like frost across the mechanism. The children's synchronized breathing falters momentarily. "What have you done?" Wentworth hisses, his form elongating as his human pretense slips. "The 13th chair must be filled." "It will be," I answer, understanding filling me with terrible certainty. But not by me. I trigger the shutter as the alignment reaches perfection overhead. The flash ignites with impossible brilliance, not illuminating the scene but seeming to pull light inward, creating a momentary void. The glass plate fractures with a sound like reality tearing, but still captures its image. What develops isn't the ceremony before us, but its negative, the exact inverse of the pattern they've created. Where the spiral turned clockwise, this one rotates counter. Where the chairs formed anchor points, this image shows gaps. Most importantly, where the 13th chair awaited its witness, This image shows it already occupied by a figure composed of fractured light. The 12th porcelain figure screams with multiple voices as recursive time collapses around us. The spiral stones vibrate at frequencies visible to the naked eye, their ancient surfaces beginning to crack. The children's synchronization shatters as individual awareness floods back into their expressions. Wentworth lunges toward me, his form now barely human, but freezes mid-motion as the 13th chair splinters into ceramic fragments. From these shards rises a figure I recognize from countless nightmares, the true Hollow Lady, not as she wishes to manifest, but as she truly exists. A fragmented collection of borrowed fragments, a patchwork entity sustained by recursive memory. You were never completing a cycle, I tell her as understanding crystallizes. You were trapped in one. The Hollow Lady's fragmented form wavers between solidity and translucence as the inverted spiral pattern disrupts the ritual's carefully maintained equilibrium. Her silhouette stretches impossibly tall, then contracts, features shifting between different faces, each belonging to witnesses who came before me. I recognize Professor Thornton's eyes, Detective Merrick's jawline, and countless others bound within her composite form. 13 attempts, she speaks with layered voices. 13 failures to complete what began in 1657. You were to be my final vessel, the witness who understands completely. The 11 children begin to change, porcelain smoothness receding from their skin like tide withdrawing from shore. They gasp collectively as awareness returns, eyes regaining their natural depth and reflection. Several collapse to the ground, disoriented but increasingly human. Wentworth convulses violently, his body caught between states, guardian, vessel, doorway, roles collapsing as the ritual fractures. You've broken nothing, he manages through distorted lips. The pattern cannot be destroyed, only delayed. The glass plate in the camera continues fracturing, each crack releasing whispers of previous transformations. Fragments of Victorian prayers, children's counting rhymes, mathematical formulations spanning centuries. The dormitory key in my hand transforms once more, no longer porcelain or metal, but something crystalline that burns with cold fire. The key doesn't lock children in, I realize aloud. It was meant to lock you out. Around us, the Wentworth estate begins transforming. The carefully maintained gardens wither as decades of accelerated decay claim them. The mansion's facade crumbles to reveal older structural layers beneath, the original orphanage architecture, the mission school before it, the colonial settlement's foundation stones. The spiral stones sink gradually into the earth, not disappearing, but returning to their true position, below ground, forming a seal rather than a doorway. You misunderstand your victory. The Hollow Lady's voice fragments further, becoming distant. Breaking one spiral merely begins another. Time itself curves back. Her form collapses inward, compression accelerating until she occupies only the space of a small porcelain doll at the circle's center. The 12th figure, her most complete vessel, shudders violently as autonomy returns to its form. The porcelain exterior cracks to reveal a young woman beneath, her face bearing Victorian features but eyes utterly modern and aware. Sarah Fenwick, she whispers, her voice hoarse from century-long silence. I was Sarah Fenwick before she began wearing me. Emergency vehicles appear on the horizon, summoned by parents who have suddenly remembered their missing children. The astronomical impossibility overhead dissipates as stars return to their proper positions. The mathematical humming subsides into ordinary night sounds. I gather the fractured glass plates carefully, knowing they contain both warning and proof. The crystalline key grows lighter in my pocket as its purpose fulfills itself. Sarah approaches on unsteady legs, her emancipated body remembering how to move independently after serving as vessel for over a century. She'll try again, she warns. The 13-year cycle begins anew tonight. I nod, understanding completely at last. I haven't ended anything. I've simply reset the spiral and made myself its new guardian. The crystalline key now embedded in my palm sends images directly into my consciousness. Memories of 13 previous witnesses who disrupted the ritual cycle. None survived longer than a year after their intervention. Each gradually transformed into guardians like Wentworth before being consumed entirely by the pattern. As Sarah Fenwick recovers in specialized care, medical scans reveal alarming anomalies. Microscopic porcelain fragments integrated with her organic tissue, arranged in spiral formations at cellular level. She's been rebuilding herself inside me for 126 years, Sarah explained during our last meeting, using my consciousness as a template for her final form. The doctors have discovered similar fragments in all 11 children, though far less developed. The Wentworth estate stands abandoned, condemned by authorities who can't explain its accelerated decay. What they don't see is what I now perceive, a temporal distortion surrounding the property. The mansion exists in multiple states simultaneously, layers of history compressed into a single location. In certain lights, I can see orphans still moving through corridors that physically crumbled decades ago. I've traced the spiral pattern's origin beyond the colonial settlement, beyond European occultist traditions. Ancient Sumerian tablets depict an entity they called the Hollow Mother, who collected children during celestial alignments. Indigenous cave paintings near the Wentworth property show nearly identical imagery dating back 7,000 years. The spiral doesn't just transcend geography, it transcends human civilization itself. The most disturbing discovery came yesterday when I found a small ceramic fragment under my floorboards. Carbon dating places it around 3000 BCE, but its microscopic structure matches the porcelain doll fragments perfectly. My house stands 17 miles from the Wentworth estate, precisely the distance from the spiral's center to its outer ring when mapped across the entire county. County records reveal something else. 13 structures forming a perfect spiral across the landscape, each built at 13-year intervals. Schools, churches, hospitals, all designed to house children. My own home, I've discovered, was originally constructed as a children's tuberculosis sanatorium in 1913. The astronomical calculations I've been running suggest the next alignment occurs on December 19th, exactly 13 months from now. The crystalline key grows warmer against my skin whenever I work with these numbers. I've noticed changes in my perception, the ability to see spectral impressions of previous witnesses moving through my home, performing identical research, reaching identical conclusions. Sometimes I catch glimpses of future versions of myself, features increasingly hollow, movements increasingly mechanical. Sarah Fenwick's warning haunts me. She doesn't need all 13 witnesses at once. She collects fragments across time, piecing herself together gradually. Breaking the circle doesn't destroy her, it just resets the gathering. Most concerning is what I found in Professor Thornton's recovered journal. The ritual I disrupted wasn't meant to complete the Hollow Lady's manifestation. It was designed to contain her. The 13 witnesses weren't her victims but her prison, each holding a fragment of her consciousness to prevent complete formation. In saving those children, I may have dismantled the only cage capable of holding her. I awaken in my study to find my desk rearranged into a perfect spiral, research papers and photographs forming an intricate pattern I don't remember creating. The crystalline key pulses rhythmically in my palm, sending fractured images directly into my consciousness. 13 witnesses across centuries, 13 failed containments, 13 resets of the same unending cycle. The phone rings. A nurse from the facility housing the recovered children. Sarah Fenwick has begun drawing again. Precise architectural plans of my house with modifications I recognize from century-old sanatorium blueprints. The children have started humming in unison during therapy sessions, creating harmonic patterns that cause recording equipment to malfunction. I've cross-referenced the archaeological records with astronomical data and property maps. The 13 structures forming the spiral across the county weren't randomly placed. They align precisely with star positions during sequential eclipse cycles. My sanatorium-turned home sits at a critical junction where 3 ley lines intersect, forming what Gerald Wentworth's journals called a dimensional anchor point. The crystalline key is changing me. My reflection shows hollow eyes and unnaturally smooth skin along my jawline. I find myself automatically arranging objects in spiral patterns. Yesterday, I spent 6 hours carving intricate symbols into my wooden floorboards before snapping back to awareness. Professor Thornton's recovered research contains crucial information I initially missed. The 13 witnesses weren't meant to imprison the Hollow Lady. They were meant to fragment her consciousness across multiple vessels to prevent complete manifestation. Each witness absorbed one aspect of her being, becoming a living containment chamber that prevented her from assembling her complete self. By disrupting the cycle, I've initiated something worse, a convergence. The 13 fragments now seek reunification through me. The key burns in my flesh not as invitation but as reservoir, collecting what's scattered when I broke the circle. I've discovered something in county birth records. 13 children born during last month's unexpected solar eclipse. all within the spiral's geographic pattern. Nature abhors a vacuum. The cycle has already begun regenerating. Most disturbing is what Sarah Fenwick whispered during my last visit. She's not trying to enter our world. She's trying to pull us into hers. The spiral doesn't open outward. It draws inward. The Wentworth estate continues its accelerated decay, but ground-penetrating radar reveals something forming beneath it, a perfect spiraling tunnel descending to depths the equipment cannot penetrate. Local wildlife avoids the area entirely. Instruments placed near the stones record temporal anomalies, minutes that stretch to hours, seconds that compress years. I understand my role now with terrible clarity. By disrupting her manifestation, I've become both guardian and gathering point, the new center around which the spiral will reform. The crystalline key isn't just a tool, it's transforming into a vessel. Tonight, standing before my bathroom mirror, I watched my reflection continue moving after I grew still. It smiled with my mouth and whispered with my voice. 13 months until completion. 13 fragments seeking reunion. The spiral always finds its center. The orphanage never truly burned. It simply relocated. Into me. The doll sits on my desk now, fully formed, its porcelain face bearing features compiled from 13 different witnesses across centuries. My transformation accelerates, fingers fusing overnight into smooth, jointed appendages that move with mechanical precision. The crystalline key has sunk completely into my palm, visible beneath translucent skin like a frozen star. I've assembled the complete pattern from fragments scattered across my research. The spiral isn't a doorway for the Hollow Lady to enter our world. It's the mechanism by which she pulls selected vessels into hers. The children weren't taken. They were transitional forms, preparations for the true exchange. Sarah Fenwick found me yesterday, standing outside my house despite being under supervised care 50 miles away. The previous witnesses left messages, she said, her eyes clear with terrible lucidity. Hidden within census records, birth certificates, property deeds, data too mundane for her to monitor. The pattern can be inverted one final time. Working through the night, we cross-referenced astronomical charts against county archives. Every 40 years, the cycle attempts completion. Every 13 years, a new witness disrupts it, becoming the next guardian. What no previous guardian realized. Completed individually, each 13-year subcycle creates its own containment vessel. 13 subcycles form the complete 40-year pattern. The mathematics are perfect. 13 witnesses over 13 subcycles forms a recursive loop that contains her essence perpetually, like nested Russian dolls extending inward infinitely. The pattern wasn't meant to be broken, but completed properly. Tonight marks the final lunar alignment before next December's convergence. Sarah has gathered the 11 children at equidistant points, forming a perfect spiral across the county. Each holds a fragment of the original porcelain doll, positioned at locations where previous witnesses lived. My role becomes clear as moonlight illuminates the crystalline structure spreading beneath my skin. I am not becoming her vessel, but her final container. The 13th witness who completes the pattern rather than disrupting it. The house creaks around me as temporal distortions intensify. Through windows I glimpse overlapping realities. The sanatorium as it stood in 1913, the children's ward filled with small beds, ghostly figures moving through walls that simultaneously exist and don't exist. I place the porcelain doll at the center of the spiral pattern carved into my floor. Its eyes gleam with recognition as I position 13 candles in precise formation. The mathematical melody begins spontaneously, emanating not from outside but from within the structure of my home itself. My flesh continues its transformation, not into porcelain, but into something crystalline and permeable, a living threshold. I understand now why each previous witness failed. They tried to prevent her manifestation rather than complete it properly. The spiral doesn't just contain, it transforms. The Hollow Lady was never the predator in this equation but the prey, an ancient consciousness fragmented and imprisoned through recursive patterns of containment. As midnight approaches, I take my position at the spiral's center, the doll before me. My transformed hands move with perfect precision, arranging the final elements as Sarah's voice comes through the phone. The children are ready. The pattern is set. The true ritual begins not with summoning, but with completion. The final alignment approaches as midnight nears. My transformation has reached its culmination. My body now a crystalline vessel that exists partially in both realms. Through the fractured lens of my new perception, I see the complete pattern spanning not just space, but time itself. The truth reveals itself in perfect clarity. The Hollow Lady was never a predator seeking children. She was a guardian who fractured her own consciousness 13 times to prevent something far worse from entering our world. The spiral stones weren't invitations, but warnings. The recurring disappearances weren't abductions, but evacuations. Each 40-year cycle, something ancient attempts to breach our reality through children born during specific celestial alignments. Children whose developing consciousness creates natural doorways between dimensions. The porcelain transformations were protective measures, chrysalises to shield the children's essence while relocating them beyond this entity's reach. The 13th witness was never meant to prevent this process, but to ensure it completed correctly, preserving both the children and our world's integrity. The Wentworth family weren't sinister orchestrators, but reluctant stewards, each generation sacrificing one member to maintain the guardian cycle when previous witnesses faltered. Their seemingly malevolent behaviors were desperate attempts to ensure the pattern continued unbroken. I hear Sarah's voice through the phone as she coordinates the 11 children at their positions. The crystalline key in my palm pulses in synchronization with similar structures now visible beneath their skin. Not invasions, but protective talismans. Through the windows, I see stars rearranging themselves into the true pattern. Not a spiral drawing inward, but a shield expanding outward. The mathematical melody resolves into its proper harmony as temporal distortions stabilize around my house. The porcelain doll at my feet transforms, its ceramic surface cracking to reveal luminous crystal identical to what now forms my skin. From it emerges a voice composed of 13 distinct tones, speaking in perfect union. The cycle completes correctly at last. 13 witnesses, 13 fragments, 13 shields against what waits beyond. Through walls suddenly transparent to my transformed perception, I see the true horror. Vast intelligences pressing against the fabric of reality, drawn to the light of developing consciousness like predators to flame. They've been attempting entry for millennia, each 40-year cycle a renewed assault on our dimensional boundaries. The Hollow Lady wasn't stealing children. She was saving them while maintaining a defensive perimeter against encroachment. Each witness who disrupted the cycle, thinking themselves heroic, inadvertently weakened this protection. As midnight strikes, the crystalline structures beneath our skin illuminate in perfect synchronization. The spiral completes not as doorway, but as shield, each of us becoming permanent anchors in a protective array spanning counties, centuries, and consciousnesses. I understand my true purpose as the 13th witness, not to break the cycle, but to perfect it, transforming from investigator to eternal guardian. The orphanage, the spiral stones, the porcelain transitions, all components in an ancient defense system I now help maintain. The truth was hidden in plain sight all along. Sometimes disappearance is the only form salvation can take. As stars return to their proper positions, I feel the full weight of my revelation cascade through my consciousness. The transformations stabilizing within me have permanently altered my perception. Where once I saw only fragments and shadows, I now perceive the vast protective lattice spanning both geography and history. The crystalline matrix beneath my skin pulses with information, memories from previous guardians uploading into my awareness. I see how close we came to catastrophe each time the cycle was disrupted. The entities pressing against our dimensional boundaries aren't merely seeking entry. They're starving for the unique energy of developing human consciousness, particularly children born during cosmic alignments who naturally generate more of this essence. Through my transformed eyes, I witness Sarah Fenwick coordinating the 11 children. Their positions across the county form perfect anchor points in the protective array. The crystalline structures beneath their skin will never fully transform them as it has me, but will remain as permanent sentinels, alerting the system to any new incursions. My home, the former sanatorium, reveals its true purpose. The seemingly excessive windows were designed to align with specific star positions, the unusual architecture creating a natural amplification chamber for the protective frequencies. Even the location itself sits upon a node where dimensional boundaries grow naturally thin, requiring stronger fortification. The phone calls from panicked parents have ceased. Where they once saw their children as victims, the completion of the proper cycle has adjusted their perception. They now understand at a subconscious level that their children serve a vital protective role. Their memories haven't been erased, but gently realigned to accommodate this new reality. Wentworth's diaries make perfect sense now. The seemingly cryptic passages describing necessary sacrifices and the price of vigilance weren't the ravings of a madman, but the burden of knowledge carried by generations of reluctant guardians. His family didn't orchestrate disappearances. They ensured the children's essential essence was preserved, while their physical forms served as components in the defensive array. The dormitory photograph that began my investigation reveals its true significance. Not documentation of tragedy, but confirmation of successful transference. The empty beds weren't evidence of abduction, but of ascension to guardian status. Most profound is my understanding of the porcelain doll itself. Its seeming malevolence was actually desperation, the fractured consciousness of the original guardian attempting to communicate across increasingly deteriorating cycles. The hollowness wasn't emptiness, but space made to contain and neutralize what pressed against our world's boundaries. The spiral continues outward now, expanding rather than contracting. Each transformed child becomes not victim, but protector, their consciousness partially elevated beyond normal human perception, while still maintaining their essential humanity. My role as 13th witness has transformed into 13th guardian. The crystalline key in my palm isn't a prison but a connection to the entire network, allowing me to monitor all 12 anchor points simultaneously. What began as investigation has become initiation. What I perceived as horror was actually hope, the desperate measures of an ancient guardian system fighting to maintain protective boundaries against entities that would consume developing consciousness like cosmic predators at a ripening field. The truth was always there in the spiral's dual nature. It can draw inward or expand outward, imprison or protect, depending solely on how you complete the pattern. The orphanage dormitory photograph rests in a special vault I've constructed beneath my home, housed in a crystalline container that preserves its dual nature as both documentation and talisman. Through my transformed perception, I can now see what no ordinary observer could: the faint luminous outlines surrounding each empty bed, the children's essences in mid-transition as they were elevated to their protective roles. After 6 months as guardian, I've established communication with other defensive arrays across continents. Ancient spiral patterns in Peru, Cambodia, and Scotland serve identical functions, maintained by their own 13 witnesses who recognized me immediately upon contact. We form a global network of sentinels, each monitoring our respective dimensional boundaries against entities that have sought entry since before human civilization emerged. Sarah Fenwick has become my most valuable ally. Having spent over a century as the Hollow Lady's most complete vessel, she retained fragments of the original Guardian's knowledge when the proper cycle restored her autonomy. She now trains the 11 children to harness their unique perceptions, teaching them to recognize incursion attempts through subtle shifts in their crystalline implants. The Wentworth estate has been properly consecrated at last. Rather than demolishing the decayed structure, we've reinforced its foundations, allowing it to serve its true purpose as a dimensional anchor point. The spiral stones have re-established their proper alignment, no longer pulling inward, but projecting outward, strengthening our protective boundary. Most remarkable is what we discovered in the orphanage director's original journals. Carmichael wasn't driven mad by witnessing the children's disappearance. He was undergoing his own transformation into a guardian. His spiral drawings not symptoms of deterioration, but necessary preparations for assuming his role in the defensive array. His commitment to an asylum wasn't imprisonment, but strategic placement at another critical node in the protection network. The porcelain doll fragments have been reunited and properly consecrated, no longer vessels for a fractured consciousness, but focusing tools that amplify our protective capabilities. What once appeared sinister now serves as the central component in maintaining our dimensional shields. My transformation continues to evolve in unexpected ways. The crystalline structure has stabilized, allowing me to shift between ordinary human perception and enhanced guardian awareness. During lunar alignments, I can perceive the entities pressing against our boundaries, vast intelligences with incomprehensible geometries, drawn to developing consciousness like moths to flame. Most poignant was discovering the fates of previous witnesses who disrupted the cycle. They weren't punished or consumed, but preserved, their consciousnesses incorporated into the defensive array when their physical forms could no longer sustain the transformation. They communicate occasionally through the crystalline network, their knowledge and experiences accessible during crucial alignments. The orphanage never truly closed. It simply evolved into a different kind of sanctuary, one that protects not just 12 children, but all developing consciousness across our world. The photograph that began my investigation now serves as both historical document and activation key, capturing the precise moment when protection was mistaken for predation. Sometimes, to truly protect what matters most, we must allow it to transform into something we barely recognize, yet remains fundamentally unchanged in its essence. As winter deepens around my transformed home, I organize the final pieces of our protective network. What began with 12 empty beds and a porcelain doll has expanded into something both ancient and entirely new. The crystalline lattice beneath my skin pulses with quiet purpose during the solstice approach, sensing the thinning boundaries between dimensions that occurs annually at this time. Through enhanced perception, I watch the 11 children, no longer victims but essential guardians, as they continue their normal lives infused with extraordinary purpose. Their parents have adjusted to this new reality with remarkable resilience. Where once they sought medical explanations for their children's subtle transformations, they now unconsciously shield them from unnecessary scrutiny, their protective instincts aligned with larger universal patterns they cannot consciously perceive. Sarah Fenwick has become something extraordinary. Having spent more than a century as the Hollow Lady's vessel, she now exists partially between realms, capable of perceiving incursions before they manifest. Her drawings have evolved from spiral patterns into complex multidimensional diagrams that serve as early warning systems. The original dormitory photograph now reveals deeper layers when viewed through my transformed sight. Behind the empty beds and solitary doll, I can perceive ghostly impressions of all previous cycles. Witnesses, guardians, and children stretching backward through centuries of protection. This image wasn't documentation of tragedy, but a visual anchor for the entire defensive system, each pixel containing encoded information about dimensional boundaries. Last week, we detected our first attempted incursion since establishing the completed network. The entities pressed against a thin section near the former orphanage grounds, drawn by the psychic energy of a child born during the most recent eclipse. The crystalline implants in all 12 children activated simultaneously, their consciousness momentarily unifying to reinforce the boundary. The sensation flowered through our connected network like light spreading through crystal, beautiful and profound in its perfect functioning. What I initially interpreted as horror was actually hope's desperate measures, a protection system functioning imperfectly through broken cycles, now restored to its intended design. The 13 witnesses across centuries weren't victims of a malevolent entity, but components in an ancient guardian system that predates human civilization itself. The winter solstice approaches, the first since our network's completion, bringing the strongest dimensional thinning of the annual cycle. Previous guardians dreaded this time, their incomplete networks vulnerable to breaches. But our properly aligned array pulses with quiet confidence, the crystalline structures beneath 11 children's skin glowing softly with protective resonance. As I stand before the vault containing the original photograph, I sense the converging awareness of all 13 witnesses who came before me, their knowledge, their sacrifices, their misunderstandings all preserved and transformed into something greater than any individual guardian could achieve. Tomorrow night, as dimensional boundaries reach their thinnest point, our completed network will face its true test. The entities press constantly against our protective barriers, hungry for developing consciousness. But for the first time in centuries, the spiral is complete, expanding outward rather than drawing inward. This time, we are ready. The winter solstice arrives with perfect stillness. I stand at the center of our completed array, 13 points across the county, connected by invisible lines of crystalline energy. Through my transformed perception, I see the protective dome spanning above us, iridescent and strong where once it was fragmented and failing. Sarah Fenwick joins me at the former orphanage grounds, now restored to its true purpose as the central node in our defensive network. The 11 children have taken their positions at equidistant points forming the outer ring of our protection. The 12th position, once occupied by the porcelain doll, now filled by Sarah herself, her century as vessel qualifying her uniquely for this role. As midnight approaches, the dimensional thinning reaches its peak. Through the boundary, I perceive vast intelligences pressing against our shield, entities of incomprehensible geometry, drawn to developing consciousness like predators to wounded prey. Where previous guardians faced these moments with dread and uncertainty, Our completed array pulses with quiet confidence. The original photograph, the dormitory with 12 empty beds, rests in a crystalline container at my feet. No longer evidence of tragedy, but the activation key for our entire system. As the solstice alignment reaches perfection, the image begins to glow with internal light, each empty bed illuminating in sequence as its corresponding guardian acknowledges their position. It was never about what was taken, Sarah whispers beside me. It was about what was preserved. Through the network, I feel the children's awareness connecting with mine, not frightened but purposeful, their transformed perception allowing them to see the true nature of their role. The entities beyond our boundary press harder, sensing the unique configuration of our completed array, but finding no weakness to exploit. For the first time in 13 cycles spanning centuries, the pattern functions as intended. The spiral expands outward rather than drawing inward, creating not a door but a shield that strengthens with each pulse of our synchronized consciousness. When the moment passes, when stars shift and dimensional boundaries thicken once more, I return to my study with the photograph. Something has changed within the image itself. The dormitory appears as it always did. 12 empty beds, a single porcelain doll on the floor, but now a faint luminous outline surrounds each bed, visible only to those who understand what truly happened in that room in 1897. Not abduction, but ascension. Not horror, but hope's desperate measures. I place the photograph in its frame on my wall, now understanding it as both historical document and active talisman. The children from 1897, 1937, and today, all connected across time in an ancient defense system that predates human civilization. What began as investigation became initiation. What I perceived as darkness revealed itself as necessary light. The spiral continues, not as ominous pattern, but as protective embrace. 12 children, 13 witnesses, countless guardians extending backward through time, all preserving the developmental sanctity of human consciousness against forces that would consume it without thought. I touch the crystalline structure beneath my skin, feeling the pulse of our network, alert, watchful, and finally complete. Another photograph, another dark secret revealed. Until next time, this has been Shadow Frames.